Hi everyone, I'm back again with another podcast. I'm here today with Georgie from Help Harry Help Others. So first I'll hand over and you just explain the story of the charity.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I'm Georgie Mosley, and I'm Harry Mosley's mum and founder of the Help Harry Help Others cancer charity. The charity was originally started by my son Harry, who was well known across Birmingham for his bracelet making. In the last 2 years of Harry's life, he raised over £750,000 for other incredible causes and made such an impact, really, and raised awareness for people going through brain tumours. We very sadly lost Harry back in 2011. He was aged just 11 years old. And then at first, as you can imagine, as a mom, no parent ever should lose their child. And I had no intention of carrying on with Harry's work because Harry was, and still is actually, the face of the charity. He was the ideas person. He was the one doing all the talks in London and, travelling around to schools, etc. And I just thought that it can't continue. But actually, when everything that busy few years of constantly being at hospital or doing an event supporting Harry at one of his events, when all that then just stopped and the world froze and I had time to reflect on the actual impact of cancer on us as a family, not just from losing Harry, coincided with all the people that then just came out of nowhere wanting to support Harry and his work. He made a massive impact across Birmingham. I just thought it's criminal of me to not use this for however long it might last and Harry's sort of the current story to support other people going through cancer. And then reflecting on, with us, everything was a waiting time, a referral process. There was nowhere to go and talk. I ended up losing my house, to try and find out how to understand about going on to benefits, when you have to give up work. It just wasn't right. So I thought I've got two options. I can either campaign government, and are they going to listen to little old me from Sheldon? No, they're not. And if so, that it's going to take years of campaigning before we make a change. Or I can use Harry's legacy and the support that's incoming and try and make an impact from today. So I decided to make Help Harry Help Others a registered charity in 2012. And yeah, we're still here somehow, clinging on for dear life like many other small charities, 14 years on. In 2015, I had the pleasure of creating and opening for Birmingham's first drop-in cancer support centre of its kind, where we now offer over 20 services on site supporting adults and children affected by any type of cancer. And it's important that I emphasise on those words because a lot of people think that Help Harry, because Harry was a child, that we're a children's charity, and they also think because he had a brain tumour, we just support people with brain tumours, but it's couldn't be further from the truth. We see between 150 and 170 people per week coming through our door. And we've already this year had more new service user registrations, so new people reaching out for our help, than we did in the whole of last year. So we're quite heavily depended on within Birmingham, and it is tough because we are a very small operational team. There's only 3 of us, but then I've got probably 40 odd service delivery people that offer, for example, of our services, drop-in emotional support, therapeutic counselling, we do coaching, mentoring, breast care and bra fitting service, benefits advice, housing advice, debt and financial advice. We do a range of support groups. We run a weekly after-school club for kids going through cancer, time for teens and time for tweens. So the tweens is for our 8 to 12-year-olds and our teens is for 18-year-olds. A range of support groups. Every Tuesday we have a men's group. We have 6 to 8 week therapeutic support groups. Health and wellbeing day, yoga, Reiki, Indian head massage, and lots of other. At the moment, one of our new sort of one-off services is we're trying to reduce digital poverty. The whole world's going online. To get a doctor's appointment, you need to go online, and our service users, we've just given them all laptops, and they're now being taught how to get online safely, how to use the NHS app, how to fill in forms online and send them, but also protect themselves at the same time. So there's loads. I could talk forever, but we're really pivotal in our local area and beyond. You know, if people can't access our centre, they can reach out to us online. But I think that, you know, the beauty of How Parry is that we're here to offer the immediacy, empathy and urgency, because without that it can be the difference between somebody being here, or if they're affected by mental health and cancer, them not. And, you know, very sad, in the last 4 weeks alone, we've been presented with three people reaching out to us, one of which was a teenager, who have attempted to take their own lives. So it's very complex stuff, and I don't think people, we're classed as holistic because we don't offer the medical care, but we actually offer the vital, real life that is needed when there is a sudden change in circumstance because of that cancer diagnosis. You know, it affects people emotionally, practically, financially, it affects relationships, routine. Anything can cause mental health issues. So in a nutshell, we support the mental well-being of cancer patients and their families from all of our 20 services that we offer here.
Yeah, I had absolutely no idea how many different things you did, how many different things you offer. And when you say there about the impacts on yourself at the time, losing your house and stuff like that, and, you know, people trying to take their lives or considering taking their lives, you don't think of all these things when someone has cancer. We think about cancer, we think about chemo, suffering, sometimes recovery, how long it's got left and how life-changing that is, but no one actually thinks of the kind of wider impact, do they?
No,
You know, the massive financial impact.
absolutely. You know, and I always say, you know, when people who have never been affected by cancer think of cancer, they think of chemo, they think of radiotherapy, they think of people hopefully getting better, and then life goes on. But actually, that's when we discover that a lot of people, you know, if they're fortunate, and so many people are, you know, survival rates are better. But actually, just because cancer has ended and that treatment has ended and the cancer has gone, emotionally, psychologically, financially, that doesn't mean that cancer's over, you know. And it's almost like people are expected to just pick up their lives and carry on, and that doesn't just sit with cancer, that sits with any life-changing illness, you know. And I don't think people, and that's why I say I hate the word that what we offer is classed as holistic. To me, I hate that word. It sounds fluffy. We offer vital support that's needed when people are in crisis and don't know where to turn because of that diagnosis. Of course, the most important thing is them getting treatment and hopefully getting better. But actually, there are millions of other areas in people's lives that change because of that. As I say, routine, lifestyle, impacts, relationships, you know, emotions, finances. And it's a bit like the closest analogy I can give is that when we all think back, dare we, to the COVID days, you know, when the Prime Minister said you all must stay home, immediately overnight our lives were changed. We all had to stay home. This impacted on people who were self-employed, people who had their own businesses. You know, we couldn't go and see family members. We were almost left in limbo, and it affected people emotionally, financially, practically, and caused isolation. But for us, it was for a time period, and that was bad enough. And that's no different to that, you know, doctor saying, you've got cancer. Immediately, overnight, on hearing that news, your lives changed. You're waiting for updates, like we, you know, from the doctor, whereas with COVID, we're waiting for updates. We're all glued to the TV screen and watching the news. That's the, you know, it's the same thing. And then being suddenly, you know, removed from our normal, habitual day-to-day life and going through COVID is the same as the cancer, you know, because everybody's so desperate, they want their life back. But the truth, the harsh truth and reality for people going through cancer is very few get that same life back. because they change as a person, their mobility might change, depending on where the cancer is, there's so many implications that they almost have to rediscover themselves as this new person. So, but it's the closest example I can give. So to anybody listening that's never been through cancer or can comprehend the impact that it has, think of COVID and what it meant for us. But for us, it's all over. But for some people going through cancer, it's, as I say, it's a time period that can be several years long, even with a good outcome. But just because of that good outcome, they then probably remain for the rest of their lives in fear. The slightest lump or bump or a similar symptom to what they had when they're diagnosed previously, adds to their mental well-being, and can reduce it because of that fear element of it. So and I don't think there's enough importance stressed on all of those things that people go through because of something happening in their lives. Like us with COVID, the amount of people and the mental health issues, it was the topic of everything because it was affecting people, so.
Oh yeah, and I can definitely relate to that. I had my heart issue back in 2018, and if someone talks to me about it or talks about what happens, or I do something with the air ambulance and we're discussing that, I then feel funny the rest of that day. It's weird. I start going to, is this something with me today? Do I don't feel quite right? Or
Yeah.
if I'm overly tired or feel a bit dizzy, I go into a, uh, is my defib going to go off today?
Yeah.
99% of the time, there's absolutely nothing wrong with me, and it's all in my mind.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to. I always say about that, I didn't have to really experience it.
Yes.
I didn't know what was going on.
Mhm.
Whereas someone who suffers from and goes through treatment with cancer, they've got to go through that mental anguish for a hell of a lot longer than I did.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think, but I mean, it sounds terrible what you went through, Dave, and this is where I'm trying to give examples of it's not just cancer, it's anybody out there that's going through something. If their life is changed overnight, whether that's COVID, whether it's cancer, whether it's heart problems, whatever that illness is that changes all that we are as humans and we become, and our routine, us as in our working professions, in our home lives, we've got a routine. It's the way we operate, it's the way we function. We're creatures of habit, and somebody whips that away. That in itself can create mental health problems. Like you say, the fear of an illness returning, like you've just mentioned, and living in fear of the unknown, that creates mental health problems. The finances do, everything does. Mental health is caused by something, and it depends on that individual, their ability to cope and see through. But sadly, people spiral into this. It feels like a bottomless pit that you're just going further and further down. But it's only when they're absolutely at their rock bottom will they reach out for support. And this is where I say about Help Harry that the point of offering that immediacy, that empathy, that urgency is because when people are already at rock bottom, they don't want to wait 6 to 9 months if they need counselling. That's the difference between them being here and not. When I talk very passionately about that, my mum was under mental health services for many years, and did I feel that she got the support? No, she didn't. It ended in her. She took her own life, and the things that I couldn't understand then, because in my teenage years, that's when her mental health issues developed and her depression. The slightest thing, even going to the dentist, was a huge trauma, but that's because of the depressed state that she was in. There's like layers of everything, isn't there? There's
Yeah.
depression, and there's real severe depression. And that's when the people don't see any way out. They're so blinkered in their mindset, their way of thinking. And that's where we step in for people going through cancer. The counsellors, the therapeutic, it's opening up their thoughts. It's the service user that does the work, not the counsellor, but it's enabling them to have that talk and that safe space to get to a better place of thinking and managing and coping with, how, and changing just their thought process as to how things are happening and realising their self-worth and how important and how loved they are, you know.
And it's not everyone has a great support network, do they? But
No.
it's also hard to often talk to the people who are closest to you about those problems. And when I had a bit of counselling before, that's what I loved, was that they didn't know anyone I knew. So it is really important that you're able to provide that. And these things I didn't know you did before we first spoke, really. In terms of funding the charity, how much do you have to raise as a charity a year to kind of keep the lights on?
So it's over 300,000 that I need to raise as a charity now. I mean, bearing in mind that, as I said, we got about 45 people on site here, but most of them, other than three of us, we've got three operational staff. So there's myself, an office and finance manager, and our welcome hub administrator, which is our lovely 73-year-old Christine, who runs up and down the corridor, meeting and greeting people and giving them tours of the cancer centre when people come in to register. But everybody else is service delivery, and 50% are volunteers. But obviously, if you imagine our therapeutic counsellors, we've got a team of 29 listeners and counsellors. You know, we need to keep up with the demand. You know, we're getting referrals across the whole of, whilst people can just directly access us, we can, we've built our credibility now within the NHS because we've been a cancer centre since 2015. And we're getting referrals from lots of different cancer wards and departments, you know, across the city. So keeping up with demand is hard, and trying to keep out to our ethos and our values of offering that immediacy. The team is just growing and growing and growing. So 300k, so we're looking at, it's about £850 a day to fund the 20 services that we offer on site, which I'm actually incredibly proud of, you know, that we are operating at such low running costs, but at the same time, you know, we're under such pressure and demand. It's for all charities now, you know, it's third sector actually, since I last had a conversation with you. So third sector, for people that don't know, is the charity sector. But third sector publications revealed in an article a couple of weeks ago about they foresee that 50% of small charities won't be here this time next year because of the pressure that they're under. They're hit by three main areas. So one is the lack of funding that's out there, and as you know, when I put that into context of Help Harry, we don't get any government or NHS funding. I am whilst I run the charity and I'm Harry's mum and run the cancer centre, I also am the fundraiser for the charity and the events person. We don't have a fundraising team, and a lot of other small charities are the same. As founders, like small businesses, you're wearing many, many hats, you know. And in truth, you know, we can't afford anybody. You know, that's the reality of it. So that's, as I say, you know, there's the lack of funding that everybody's able to get as smaller charities. It's a lot of the larger charities that get the funding. We're then hit with the fact that the increase in the demand, which means our services, our costs are going up. As I said, you know, we're even having a lot larger charities referring to us because we've got the hub in the community. The example of that, when you relate it to Help Harry and back up what the third sector is saying, we're now receiving referrals across all the hospitals in Birmingham coming to Help Harry, which then makes our costs go up. And then the third and final point is the lack of public engagement. So we've always been self-sufficient on just, you know, I try and be as visible as I can. I support a lot of our supporters' events because, you know, I appreciate that's my way of thanking them by attending and turning up. But since the pandemic, there's almost this shift in people's lives, which I understand. That combined with the fact that people just haven't got money. There's been so much noise in the world, you know, with all the different things, changes in government, the wars that are happening, you know, the Brexit, it's, you know, and what's happening in the economy. People are nervous, if they have got money, they're holding back. So, but that doesn't help the survival of smaller charities. We do lots of events and we're finding it, you know, we had a golf day just yesterday, and this year, you know, was our best year for a number of years. We had 19 teams, but that was really hard work and almost, begging our supporters to take a team, whereas that didn't happen in the early days. So I suppose in that conversation about the impact on smaller charities, anybody listening to this podcast, even if you're not, we'd love the support from the community, and we need it. But so does every other small charity. So if you don't, if you're not passionate about cancer, I always say that, and it's true that although I'm passionate, obviously, about Help Harry because of the impact on our lives through cancer, charity is personal. You choose a charity because you've been affected by a cause or inspired by it. If you've not been affected by cancer or you're not inspired by the work that Help Harry does, then please just, when you're looking at, if you're a business and you're looking at supporting a charity, or you're an individual looking to undertake a challenge or doing something, look at your local small charities that are so overlooked in the community for where money comes in, but you can guarantee they're the ones with the hubs, they're the ones offering the face-to-face support, and the ones that act in real time and that will go above and beyond to make sure that these people get whatever support they need.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? Your smaller charities really do need the support, and it's why when we set up the foundation that we decided that the route was to pick more charities
Yeah.
rather than pick one charity and do one big check. So we started off with one a month. We're now doing 18 this year, plus then fundraising things on top of. And the plan is to grow that. In a dream scenario, if I can keep eking the growth out of the company and growth of fundraising ideas, then I'd like to get to the point that we're giving a check out a week.
Yeah.
Because it genuinely wouldn't be hard to find 52 good charities.
Yeah.
People think that'd be really hard, but actually it isn't.
Yeah.
There's an abundance of people we'd love to support. We're not able to.
Yeah.
And I am, until I started this podcast, I've never spoken to yourselves. We've not supported you before. We'll definitely support you at a point in the future, but we've done the plans for this year and you go, oh God, they're a good charity. How have we not included them? and then we meet someone else and I go, oh, we haven't included them either.
Yeah.
And it's rare that I get to know one and go, nah, I won't bother with that. So it's hard. And I'm guessing, because I've heard it from everyone, companies have been hit with a lot of costs and the amount they're donating is smaller. And, I found in the events we've tried to put on this year, trying to get people to sign up and get money out of people,
Tough.
You need your crowbar.
So you might pain because I'm always on to, our golf day's now done, and thank you so much actually, because you gave us a prize for our raffle for our golf day, which I really, really appreciate. And that's it, but it's not always about the money. If businesses can't help you in the sense of, don't giving you a check, and of course, that's the fundamental thing we need to keep us operational, but actually the awareness, that you might not be able to, Dave, but you might know a company that's looking for a charity to support, that is, that does raise significant amount, or even penny, the pennies add up. So I will be, I would never give up on an event that's in my diary that's a local community event that might raise a couple of £100. If that's in my diary, it's equally as important as somebody that's going to do an event that's raising 10 grand for us, because everybody, they've had the thought about Help Harry, they've put the same time and effort in. It's all important. So, and that's where I try and cover a range of doing our own events. Yes, we try and do some corporate events, but I also go and sit outside Asda in Chelmsley Wood and I'll have a bracelet sale or knot cuts in Shirley, and because it's people, it's a person-centered approach. It's people buying to people, and I am a bit of a doer. Do you know what I mean? I'm not a charity CEO, and I don't think anyone is as a small charity that sits behind a desk. Don't get me wrong, I do sit behind a laptop about 12 hours a day, but I'm still doing the events and I'm here and I'm there and doing what I can to just be as visible as possible in whatever way I can. So that's another. And also businesses might be able to offer a skill. As a small charity, I'm wearing many hats, and I think people sometimes forget that Help Harry is everything that I've done to date is self-taught, and I'm still learning every single day. Is the way that I do things the best way, the best practice? Maybe not, but it's all I know. So sometimes companies might be able to come in and offer a specific skill set to give advice, to give their expertise. And really, that's what our counsellors do. So, yes, some of them have to charge us, they've got livelihoods, but they offer it a much reduced rate so that, we only pay a flat rate, but you would not pay yourself to see a counsellor for the rate that we get. So they are giving back, but they still need to live. So there's so many ways that people can support, but of course, yeah, sadly we need the money. And the sad thing for me as Harry's mum and founder is, I must spend a good 70% of my time focusing on where the next penny's coming from. We've just done our golf day. We've now got an event, with Suggs from Madness coming in October at Hogarth, and I'm always on to the next thing. In between that, I've always got supporters events. But imagine the impact of the work that I could do on our services and delivery. We've got a great reputation. We offer such a lot. There's no other centre across Birmingham that offers all what we do. I'm actually sat now staring out the window. We've got a 44-ton MRI scanner on site where we've got people at high risk of lung cancer coming in for lung screening. And that's an additional 5,000 people coming through our door. So we're a real hub. But we could do so much more if I didn't have to spend so much time focusing on the fundraising, the money and the events. And whilst I love everybody's support, that's not why I do what I do.
No.
A lot of people say to me, George, well, if anything ever happens to the charity and you're forced to close down, go and be an event organiser. No, thank you. Do you know what I mean? I do it because I have to, because I need to, and I will do, as Harry's mum, whatever I need to do to keep this place running.
Yeah. Oh, it is, and I've said it repeatedly to people lately who are doing this. People like yourselves should inspire people to do more. I hear these stories and I always come off and think, right, what's the next charity idea we can do? What,
Yeah.
I'm going to be doing an announcement later of an event we're putting on next year for one of the charities we support.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a hell of a lot of work, but if we pull it off, it'll raise a lot of money. And then we'll be on to the next idea, because I take, inspiration from the people I meet. I take pride in being able to help you guys and utilise maybe a slightly wider voice than we sometimes should have for the size of company we are. If I can rope people in and get other people doing stuff as well, it is good. And it's an example I want to set to my kids. If I'm honest, they're one of the biggest motivators of why I do this. Is I don't want them to think I'm just work.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'd be proud of that. I mean, they're only 5 and 7, but
Yeah.
the stuff my 7-year-old always puts when they ask her to write a line in a card for me from school,
Yeah.
it's always charity related.
Yeah.
Because she helps me with certain things. She comes when we put on the five-a-side football. She comes to our Christmas event.
Yeah. And that's inspiring, Harry, I mean, as well as the work we do with cancer, so, Harry's story has a message to inspire the next generation. Harry was a council estate boy. He didn't come from a family with lots of money, we're average working class. Even through the face of adversity, as that council estate boy, in the last 2 years of his life, he raised over £750,000 for other charities. And I always say that he's just testament and proof to the fact that regardless of your age, your wealth, your lifestyle and your well-being, you can do anything if you're passionate enough. And Harry taught me that. That was an education lesson that he gave to his mom when I thought, oh, I can't run a charity. The thought of it just gave me shivers down my spine. But we must be doing something right. We're here 14 years on. And now every time I go in, I work with a lot of schools, and I go in and I deliver assemblies on Harry's story, because it's not just about the cancer, but, and I always remember one assembly, I had a little girl come up to me and she went, She said, I loved Harry's story. She says, and Miss, she called me. She said, every time I think of my grandma, I cry. And I said, why is that? She says, well, she was in a care home and she fell and she died. And she said, and I cry every day. She said, but I'm not going to cry anymore. I'm going to be like Harry and I'm going to make some bracelets and I'm going to raise money for her care home. Do you know what I mean? Just from sharing Harry's story, mindset of young people. And before the pandemic, I used to go into young offenders institutes, and yes, these lads are all 15 to 18, they've all done wrong. But actually, when you sit with someone and you listen, and there was one young man, and his story resonated with me, and I said, come on, tell me, he'd been in for, minor like theft and burglary, which is severe and it's wrong. But I said, tell me, how did you get that? How did you go down that path? He lost his brother to cancer, started hanging out with the wrong people. Parents are grieving. He's just lost, roaming the streets, getting with the wrong people. There you go. And I went home that night. I mean, I always hug my son, although he always gives me a very funny face now and goes, when I try and give him a love or a kiss. And I went, you know what, son? I said, I always tell you, but I am so immensely proud of you because, and I shared the story with him of who I'd been with that day. And I said, that could easily be you. And I would totally understand it because some of these individuals, and it's not justifying people doing wrong, but actually, if we focus on the why have they got there? Why have they done that? If it's just because of genuine greed and whatever, but sometimes, there's a percentage of these cases, it's because of what life's thrown at them. It's because of all they know, you know. They haven't had those loving families that we're all accustomed to or the support network behind them. These are people that just don't know how to navigate life and don't know where to turn. And this is where, if I can use Harry's story, we've got a schools enterprise where we're going to schools and we set up bracelet making clubs, and the kids then get split into IT, sales, marketing, production, finance, distribution, because to make and sell a bracelet, it's business.
Yeah.
But the business element becomes secondary, and that's what I do with the young offenders. They set up a bracelet making club, and I go in as a mum, share Harry's story, explain obviously that we've lost him, show a little video of Harry in his, his hoodie and his trainers. They can all relate to him, and I'm like, look, I need your help. I'm trying to help people with cancer. They engage. Harry resonates with a lot of young men, and then they've got time on their hands. They're inside. So we get them making and selling bracelets, and when they have what they call rattle days, which is where they're going to the communities to do some outreach work, they sell Harry's bracelets, and then we split the money between the Young Offenders Institute and Harry's own charity. That's what we do with schools. So there's the cancer bit of what we do, but actually Harry's story is so much bigger to inspire so many young people and change their lives. That's something that I'm also really immensely proud. The problem is it relies on me being here, there and everywhere, and when you're running the charity and trying to promote that, it's that's the hard thing. But there's a very unique Brummie story in Harry and Help Harry.
Yeah, there definitely is. In terms of other people helping you that have been watching, presumably there's a link on your website to just donate.
Yes, absolutely. If they visit hhho.org.uk, there's a donate button on the website, and of course we would welcome that. One of our big appeals that are on their website is our Club Harry. So what we do ask, if anybody out there can sacrifice the cost of a coffee once a month, £3, and buy, you imagine the amounts of, with 170 people coming through our doors every week, imagine the amounts of coffees that we make. So if people can sacrifice that once a month and sign up to our Club Harry, which is our direct debit scheme, they'll never be hassled to increase the money. They won't hear off us. But, it's all those £3 add up, and they can add up to make the difference between Help Harry being here or not. So we'd appreciate that.
That's great. Yeah, guys, go on, sign up. We can all spare £3. I'm sure at some point it's going to cost me a lot more than £3 meeting you, but no, we'll definitely do something together next year, I'm sure. I appreciate you coming on, telling everyone, and it's obviously a hard subject to talk about, but something you should be really proud of.
Thank you. And thank you, for all that you're doing for all charities and the people that you're interviewing. It's the awareness that, as I say, is just as important as the money. So to be able to share, this podcast might reach somebody that really needs our help, and thanks to you, that's enabled to happen. So it's great work that you're doing, and thank you.
Appreciate it. Right, cheers everyone for watching.